He hadn't heard a baby cry in 20 years, not since the fire that took his sight, his family, and his faith. But that night, on his cold wooden porch, a sound broke the silence. A baby, left in a basket, with nothing but a note. Her name is Millie. I heard you still pray. Everyone said a blind cowboy couldn't raise a child. They were wrong, because what he saw in her, no one else ever did. And when they came to take her away, they didn't know what kind of man they were messing with. Wade Granger had once been the best rider in 3 counties. Strong, sharp-eyed, and so good with horses they called him the Whisperer of Wild Things. But that was 21 years ago, before the barn fire. Before the smoke took his sight. Before the silence took everything else. Now, folks in Silver Butte just called him the Blind Cowboy. Said it with half pity, half respect. He lived alone in a one-room cabin outside town, built it himself after the fire. Every nail driven by memory, not sight. No wife, no children. Just his dog Buck, his mare Daisy, and a quiet porch that faced the setting sun he could no longer see. He didn't ask for much. He made his coffee by feel, chopped firewood by sound, and knew the land better than most sighted men ever would. But some nights, the silence got loud, especially in winter, when the snow blanketed the world and even Buck didn't bark. That night was one of those nights. Wade had just poured hot water into a tin cup when he heard it, faint at first like wind whistling wrong. Then it came again, clear, human. A baby's cry. He froze. No one ever came this far out. Not in January. Not after dark. Not to him. At first, he thought it might be a coyote's call or an owl gone strange. But Buck had perked up too, ears high, body stiff. Then came a soft scraping sound on the front steps. Wade moved fast, for a blind man, cane in hand, heart pounding, senses stretched out like ropes. He opened the door. Nothing but cold. And then his boot nudged something. A basket. Quilt-wrapped, still warm. The crying was softer now, tired, frightened. Wade crouched, hands trembling as they found the edge of the bundle. He touched a tiny mitten, then a cheek, warm and damp with tears. A baby, no more than a few weeks old. Pinned to the side was a folded scrap of paper. He couldn't read it. But Wade had learned something about trust, and he knew when something was written with a shaking hand and a desperate heart. He held the child to his chest. She didn't cry anymore, just nestled in. "Lord," he whispered into the night, voice hoarse from disuse, "what do I do with this?" There was no answer, but for the first time in years, Wade didn't feel empty. He felt needed, and that was more than he'd dared ask for in a long, long time. By sunrise, Wade had already made up his mind. He couldn't read the note, couldn't be sure who had left her or why. But he knew what mattered. The baby was alive, and she was his responsibility now. He fed her warm milk from a bottle left in the basket. She drank greedily, like no one had fed her in too long. Then she slept, curled against his chest in the chair by the fire, her tiny hand clutching the edge of his flannel shirt like she knew she'd found home. He named her Millie. Didn't know why, just felt right. By noon, he'd wrapped her in the softest blanket he owned and saddled Daisy, tying an extra strap to keep Millie safe against him. The dog Buck trotted alongside as they made their slow way into Silver Butte. It had been years since Wade rode into town in daylight. Folks paused mid-step. Mabel at the Mercantile nearly dropped her broom. Wade Granger, with a baby? He didn't stop to explain. He wasn't much for words. Just bought what he needed. Formula, diapers, glass bottles, a wool hat for the cold. "Whose child is that?" Mabel finally asked. "She's mine now," Wade said softly, counting coins by feel. Someone left her with me. I reckon that means something. Mabel frowned. You gonna raise her, like this? She didn't say blind, but it hung in the air anyway. I raised horses, built a cabin, survived a fire. He paused. I can rock a baby. She didn't argue, but by nightfall, the whole town had heard. In the saloon, men shook their heads. A blind man? That ain't right. He'll drop her first storm that comes. She needs a real home. But not everyone judged. Doc Harland, the old doctor with shaking hands and a soft voice, came by that evening, brought a stethoscope and checked Millie's chest, declared her healthy as a spring colt. Nothing wrong with her but a little hunger, he said. And I reckon you'll fix that just fine. Wade nodded once. She sleeps good against my heart. Doc smiled. That's how you know she's safe. And that night, when Wade sat by the fire with Millie resting on his chest and Buck curled at their feet, the old cowboy finally spoke a prayer. Not for strength, not for justice, just for time. Time to learn her sounds. Time to earn her trust. Time to build something that didn't vanish in smoke. Because in the baby's breathing, in the warmth of her small body tucked against his own, he felt something he hadn't felt in 2 decades. Purpose. It was a Tuesday when the car showed up. Wade heard it before he saw anything, tires crunching slow over gravel, the weight of government in every turn. Buck growled low from under the porch. Daisy shifted nervously in the barn. 2 doors slammed. A woman's voice called out, "Mr. Granger, I'm with Child Welfare. We need to talk." Wade opened the door. Millie tucked in one arm, steady on his feet. His voice came calm but cold. She's sleeping. The woman, Miss Price, clipboard in hand, city boots muddy from his drive, didn't flinch. We received an anonymous report that a child is being kept here, in unsafe conditions, that you're visually impaired and live alone. Wade nodded once. All true, she blinked. I've kept her warm, fed her 3 times a day, rocked her to sleep every night. If that's unsafe, you'll have to explain how. The agent looked around, at the rocking chair with the quilt, the kettle whistling softly, the bag of baby things neatly stacked. She expected chaos. She found order. But rules were rules. We'll have to take her into temporary care, pending a full assessment. The world went still. Wade's voice cracked for the first time. You'll take her from the only arm she's ever slept in? Miss Price didn't answer. She just held out her hands. Wade bent slowly, kissed Millie's forehead, and whispered, You hold on, little one. I'll come for you. He passed her over like handing off his own heart. The door closed. The silence returned. But this time it was unbearable. That night, Wade didn't touch his food. Buck lay under the crib, unmoving. The fire burned low and mean. He sat by it, hat in his lap, fingers twitching like they missed her already. But something had changed. This wasn't the silence of surrender anymore. It was the silence before a storm. Wade Granger had never begged a day in his life. Not when he lost his sight. Not when the fire took his land. Not when the world forgot his name. But for Millie, he knocked on doors. He showed up at the town hall the next morning, wearing his best coat and hat, beard trimmed, cane polished. He asked for Ms. Price, politely, firmly. When they told him the process could take months, he said, Then I'll be here every week until it's done. And he was. He learned to cook by precise touch, using a timer and a string system for the stove. He had the sheriff's son teach him how to install railings by feel. He let Doc Harland teach him basic pediatric first aid, even though he was terrified of doing something wrong. And most of all, he kept Millie's room just as it was, made the bed each morning, warmed her blankets by the fire each night, and whispered her name into the quiet before falling asleep. "Millie, your old cowboy's coming." The town noticed. Even Mabel, who once doubted, brought by jars of sweet preserves and read letters out loud. Legal updates Wade couldn't read himself. Word traveled, and one late afternoon, just as snow began to fall, the car came back. Miss Price stepped out. But this time she wasn't alone. She opened the back door. Millie peeked out, bigger now. In a blue knitted hat someone had made for her, cheeks round and pink, eyes lit up like lanterns at a fair. Wade didn't say a word. He just knelt and opened his arms. And she leaned into him, no hesitation, no cry. Just the soft sound of belonging. Miss Price stood quietly for a moment, then spoke, her voice not official this time. She never bonded with anyone else. Slept through the night only once, when your name was said out loud. Wade's eyes, though blind, filled with something deeper than tears. Reverence. "She knew I'd come," he whispered. And from that day on, Silver Butte changed its story. No longer that blind cowboy. Now, that man who raised a child when no one believed he could. Millie grew up with skinned knees, braids, and bedtime stories Wade told from memory. He couldn't read her books, but he remembered them, every word, every voice. And every time she asked, "Daddy, how come you can't see me?" He'd smile and say, "Maybe not with my eyes, darlin', but I saw you from the very start, right where it counts."